I had my son way too young with my then boyfriend. We split up when he moved away for college and became an absent father when he returned for the summers. He became more active when he moved back after graduating, and we started doing 50 to 50 custody. I was 24 then and went to community college and got into sonography school, and I'm now an obstetric sonographer. During that time, it came out that my ex had never graduated and was in enormous debt from gambling during his time away. It explains why, with a full ride scholarship and a degree in a high paying field, he was working at the mall. Once I got a job, I was able to upgrade my standard of living and provide a better life for me and my son. He's now nearly adult and entering senior year soon, and I want him to get a lovely gift to celebrate his birthday this summer. I asked him earlier this year when we talked about cars, what car he would want, and he said a 2023 Camry. While we're financially well off and don't struggle, I know he thinks buying a car is out of our budget, so he didn't suspect a thing. Here's the issue. I was speaking to my ex's sister, whom I am semi-close to, and I brought up the idea to her. She seemed excited, but then said I shouldn't. She said it makes her brother look bad since he doesn't have a car, and it would crush him to know that his son has a brand new paid-off car while he barely scrapes by. I told her that's not my issue and that it's not my fault he doesn't have his life together. He's 33 years old and still lives at home, doesn't have a car, and constantly switches retail jobs after spending weeks stretching out and watching orientation videos as long as he can. My son told me he recently spent almost 2 months watching Home Depot orientation videos and then quitting the first week on the floor. He doesn't want to work hard, so why should I feel bad? After a few days, she calls me and says she has an amazing compromise. She told my ex that I had planned to buy a special gift for my son this summer and asked if he was willing to pitch in. He offered $80, and she's going to add another $80 for a total of $160. Then we could tell our son we bought it together and he feels like his dad pitched in. This is for a $34,000 car. I told her no thanks. I have it covered, and she got upset and said that this could bring my son closer to his father, since they don't have much of a relationship, and not to be a selfish idiot. Ever since I said no, she called me twice, calling me an idiot and saying I should either let him chip in or not buy it at all. Am I the idiot? Ha ha ha, is she kidding? Not the idiot. So, she doesn't want her brother to feel bad that his son has a car and he doesn't? OMG, they need to grow up. He does not work to improve his life, it sounds like, and that's not for you or your son to feel bad about. And now they want to chip in a couple of $100s on a $34,000 car and try to make it sound like they bought it too? Please, your son is smart enough. He would see through that anyway. Also, if he isn't close to his son, that sounds like that's on him as well. Good for you for working hard to give him a good life. You don't owe them anything. Yeah, $160. How generous of them. Has this man even paid child support all these years? Oh, he was just busy gambling. Dad can suck it up and reap what he's sown. His sister's crossing a major line, thinking that $160 is enough. If it was a difference of even a grand or two, I'd maybe entertain it. But what they're proposing is insulting to the work you've put in. LMFAO, $80. We got a big spender for an ex. The gift that you worked hard for, not ex, not his sister. It's your moment with your son. If dad and sister-in-law want a moment, well, they can work for it, as you did. I say again, your son is a smart kid. He sees your ex lacking. He's not gonna believe for a minute that your ex significantly contributed to the car. Here's the other thing. Say son believes ex paid for half. The ex could turn around and guilt the son into lending him the car because he sacrificed so much to help pay for it. Go with the truth. It's the best option in the long run. Congratulations on your son's graduation, and tell your ex to buy some fuzzy dice or whatever. But remind your ex that these are a prop and he can't gamble with them. My wife is flying to see family for just 4 quick days this weekend, and the airport is 1 hour away. She returns back and lands at 10:30 a.m. on Independence Day. We have kids, and I want to take them to our town's wet parade and fun activities that morning for the celebration. We didn't make part of last year's celebration, and I was looking forward to this year's. She asked me to drop her at the airport, Initially, I was all for it, but then learning about her return time, this is where the disagreement began. Our family car is in the shop, but we have a loaner from the dealer. I asked her to think about driving herself, so we could celebrate the festivities, and she instantly got mad. That'll cost us hundreds more dollars. Parking is $8 a day. The loaner isn't ours. What if it sells while I'm away? Then they wait. Why can't you support me through this and not be selfish? Who's selfish here? The festivities go on all day. I'm only asking for 2 hours. 9 to 3 p.m. is the duration of the festivities. These were some of the statements immediately made. She even said, my dad wouldn't hesitate to support his wife. I think her dad would shrug and say, just drive yourself. Am I the idiot? Because I want to take the kids to our town's 4th of July celebrations and would prefer my wife drive herself to and from the airport? Not the idiot. Airport pickup and drop off is a luxury. Either my wife and I offer the other, if the stars align just right, otherwise we hire a cab. Loaners don't sell while they're being loaned. That's not how the process works. Parking wouldn't be hundreds of dollars, it would be $32. Having said that, you could pick her up by 11, be home by noon, and still attend the festivities for 3 hours, in ideal conditions. Barring any flight delays, traffic jams, or small kids' meltdowns, there are a ton of things that can go wrong, especially with the kids in the car. Anyone with children knows that a 2-hour round trip on Google Maps doesn't equate to a 2-hour round trip in reality. It's unreasonable for the wife to make that demand when she can just drive herself, with much less of an imposition on her time than it would be on his. I agree with every word. Opie isn't some deadbeat dad wanting to hang out with his buddies on the 4th. He wants to take the kids to a kid-centric event. I'm a mom, and if I were in this situation, I'd tell my husband, have fun. I'll try to join you when I get home. In my honest opinion, the wife's being extremely selfish and not thinking of her kids or her husband. The wife needs to suck it up and drive herself. Don't back down, Opie. You're the only one in this situation thinking of the kids. Take them to the parade and have a great time. This is so stupid. My girlfriend thinks I'm an idiot, so I want some second opinions. We're both quite serious tea drinkers, being from the UK, at least 3 cups a day. I have mine with 1 spoon of sugar. She has no sugar. We've been dating for a year now. In the first month of dating, things were great, and she made my tea properly. Then she slowly started to forget, and made us both cups with no sugar. I gently reminded her that I like it with 1 sugar, but she wouldn't remember and kept making me non-sweet tea. So I decided to just make both of our teas going forward throughout the day to save the hassle. However, lately, I've been tired of having to make all this tea, and I asked her if she could make me a cup once in a while. I don't think it's fair that I make her nice teas, and she can't return the favor. Today she made me tea with no sugar, once again, and I got fed up and asked her why she doesn't add sugar to mine. It feels deliberate, to which she told me she forgets, and that's just how she does it, and I can add my own sugar after. So I said that wasn't the point, and moving forward, until she can make my tea nicely and take my taste into account, I will no longer be making her tea. I remember her little dietary quirks, and it just feels off that she won't remember this for me. She says it's stupid for me to go on strike about making her tea, and I'm weaponizing it, and it takes 2 minutes. However, I'm tired of making her perfect tea, while she doesn't even put any effort into mine. Am I the idiot? People are gonna get onto you with, it's just sugar, but I get your point. It's the effort. You take the time to remember what she likes, and do that if you're making for both of you, and she doesn't return the favor. It feels lopsided to you, hence the question. You are not the idiot. Exactly, they've been dating for a year now. It's not like it's some complicated Starbucks order. It's 1 spoon of sugar. I'd honestly start making the tea, but putting 1 sugar in her tea as well. If she needs help remembering your preference for something as simple as tea, why should you go to the trouble of it? It's a simple lack of respect. If he wasn't British, I would have suggested that as well, but he's probably too darn polite for stooping to the level the rest of the world would applaud, Canadians probably being the exception. As an American who used to drink sweet tea, I cannot relate. LOL, we drink tea syrup in this area. No sugar? Get out, OP. You can have a tea war if you like. But the real question here is a fairly fundamental relationship question. Do you want to remain in a relationship with this person? My partner and I are typical sleep-deprived parents of three children, ages toddler to infant. I'm a stay-at-home mom while my partner commutes for work, and depending on which site he's at, can be on the road for more than 6 hours a day. When necessary, he'll get a hotel room closer to the job site. Getting up with the children during the night has always been my responsibility. The logic behind this is that his sleep should be the priority due to the dangers of driving while drowsy. I've always accepted this without complaint. However, since the birth of our youngest, my partner's begun to accuse me of intentionally disrupting his sleep if the baby wakes him up at night. This past week, my partner had a few long days and was gone from early Wednesday morning until late Friday night. Please, no judgment, but I was so busy, exhausted, and overwhelmed during that time that I didn't get the opportunity to shower. I felt disgusting. It took ages for the children to fall asleep with the excitement of Daddy being home. But around midnight Friday night, I finally got the opportunity to treat myself to a shower. I hoped the baby would stay asleep, but if he didn't, there was finally another adult to cover for me. And as the next day was Saturday, there was no commute to worry about. Well, of course the baby woke up, and my partner was absolutely livid. I was accused of being selfish, vindictive, unsupportive, and using the baby as a weapon to punish my partner for getting more sleep than me. I was called every curse word in the book, and when I asked why my partner at no point tried to pick up or soothe the baby, I was told that he doesn't have tits to put the baby back to sleep. So, what would be the point? At first, I was equally angry at my partner for choosing to lash out at me instead of caring for the baby. However, now that I've calmed down, I've started worrying that I was wrong. While my partner's accusations were wildly off base, I may have been an idiot to just assume it would be okay for the baby to wake him, especially when the baby's nighttime care has historically been my responsibility. So, am I the idiot for assuming it would be okay to let the baby wake up my partner because I desperately needed a shower? Not the idiot. Even though you're a stay-at-home mom, that doesn't mean you're the only one with parental responsibilities. Letting your partner sleep while you care for the baby at night so he's not driving drowsy is a fine concept, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have to do anything ever at nighttime. And the fact that it was a night when he didn't have to drive the next day is the icing on the cake. Taking a shower for the first time in several days while there's another adult around is not a selfish act or weaponizing your baby. It's basic human hygiene that you shouldn't have to apologize for. Tell your partner it's time to start being a parent. How would he do this without tits? It's common knowledge that women change diapers with their tits. I'd go so far as to call it weaponized incompetence. Sure, he doesn't have breasts, but sticking the baby on the boob isn't the only way to get them back to sleep. And even if it was, does he still not have a responsibility to at least comfort his child until the mom returns to feed the baby? Come on now, stop acting like you're helpless in this situation. I bet he got perfect long sleep time, Wednesday and Thursday nights away, while you were doing 100% of childcare and couldn't even get a shower for yourself. You've given him way too much of a break on care duties if he doesn't even know how to pick up his baby to soothe it. Girl, stop allowing this person to procreate using your uterus. Please stop. That level of aggression would be an absolute deal breaker for me. This happened over a year ago, but this situation has still affected my family, and my mom won't stop getting on my husband's and mine, case even now. My father had diabetes and his health was deteriorating fast. He was in the hospital and then got out. After he got out, he was weak and was trying to rest at home. I come from a big family with a lot of siblings. One of my sisters travels all through Europe and is frequently moving. I'm in the US and I haven't been back to Europe in over a decade, but I talk a lot on the phone with them. We'll call my sister Anna. Anna suddenly moved into my parents' house with her husband and 8 children for an unknown period of time and for reasons no one knows. Well, she had nowhere else to go, apparently. My mom is the closest with her and has always been sympathetic towards her, so she's fine with her being there. My dad was exhausted, coming home from the hospital just a day or two ago. My husband was talking to him on the phone and heard all these kids screaming and making noises. He asked if everything's okay. My father just said he's tired, overwhelmed, can't take it anymore, and just wants to rest. My dad talks to my brother who lives there and talks about the environment in the house. My brother said it was a disaster and pretty noisy since the kids were running everywhere. My mom, however, said that it's not a big deal and not that noisy. Well, we all just had a feeling my dad was going to die any day now, and these were his last months alive. My husband and I felt bad for my dad and thought he deserved peace in his last moments. My husband asked to speak to my mother and she said, no, not now. So my husband asked to speak to Anna's husband. He said, if you don't leave this house by 7 o'clock p.m., then I'll pay for a rental home where he can rest his final days. It's not okay for this man to work all his life and he can't even die peacefully in his own home. I'll be calling back to make sure you've left. They tried to talk back and downplay everything. But my husband really put his foot down and ultimately they left. After about 2 days, my father had to go back to the hospital and died. My mother's still upset with me and my husband that he kicked Anna and her family out. She still comments to my husband and acts like we were really out of line and rude. I want to add that Anna was and still is building a new home near my parents' house. So they have some money. Am I the idiot for letting my husband kick my sister's family out of my parents' house? Edit. I just want to add since there's a little confusion that this was our last resort since it's pretty big. But my mom didn't want to speak to us at all and always sides with Anna. She was babysitting the kids and ignored my father. So he was pretty much by himself after coming out of the ICU. But my dad was so weak and was mentally done. When my husband inquired about Anna's husband, he said, don't worry, it'll all work itself out. You are the idiot. It was not your husband's place to dictate what happens in other people's homes. You crossed the line. And how do you know that the stress of your sister and the children moving out didn't hurt your father in his dying moments? Why would he want the end of his life filled with family strife? Your inappropriate actions may have caused him more hurt. You fools. Not only that, you hurt the living people who were the ones that were there with him in his dying hours. You caused more stress for your mom, siblings, and nieces and nephews than necessary. Wow, how selfish of you. Imagine not being able to cook your own meals after a lifetime of cooking, not being able to drive a car, sign your name, write or wash your body, or convey your thoughts clearly. Your one strong body is a shell of itself. You have trouble walking or picking things up. Now imagine how exhausting that must feel, day in and day out. Then add 8 noisy young children and an unsupportive wife to that scenario when you're just trying to survive. You and your husband are not the idiot. At least you tried to give your father some peace in his final days. Sorry for your loss. Agreed. Your husband did the right thing. I've dealt with serious health issues, and I can't imagine having a bunch of kids around. When you're suffering, all you want is to be left alone in peace. Your mom probably needed their presence to distract her. That's my guess. Regardless, all you can do now is to say, yes, Mom, we know. You've told us multiple times. And my fiancé, 24, and I, 26, liked to host parties at our house for all of our friends. We met at a party 3 years before we got engaged. For the most part, we had same-gender friends to avoid temptation. There was one time my fiancé became friends with a man, and he turned it into something flirtatious, so she told me right away and stopped communicating with him. That's the proper way to handle someone coming on to you when you're engaged to be married. So she built trust with me, more than once, which is why what she did came as such a shock to me. I'll admit that during the week before this party we had, I was focusing a lot on my writing jobs. It involved a lot of focus on my computer, without interruption. So when the night of the party came, I promised her I wouldn't work so we could have a good time. Well, we mingled together for some time, but one of my friends started behaving really weirdly. I became concerned for him and started paying extra attention to him. He told me something about the medicine he took, along with drinking alcohol. He started twitching and struggling to breathe. I decided to call an ambulance for him. He groggily asked me to go to the hospital with him because he was scared, so I did. I texted my fiancé's phone to let her know what was going on. I didn't get a reply. It was 3 a.m. by the time I returned home. My friend was staying in the hospital overnight. I walked upstairs, half asleep, and didn't find my fiancé in our bedroom. I went to the guest room and found the door locked. I started knocking on the door loudly, asking for my fiancé. She opened the door, half asleep, wearing only a blanket. My childhood best friend was half asleep on the bed, only covered by a sheet. I could see fear setting in both of their faces. I asked her what the hell they were doing, and she started crying, saying it was my fault for leaving them alone while they drank. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I asked if they had sex, even though it was pretty obvious they did, and both of them tried to play dumb like they couldn't remember. I was in the middle of asking my fiancé to come with me when she suddenly bolted to the bathroom. I tried to come in, but she locked the door. She was clean up. I looked at the man who used to be my best friend and asked him on a real personal level if he had slept with my woman. He was instantly defeated and looked at the floor. He couldn't say anything except that he was really sorry and he drank a lot. As he got dressed, he said he hoped I could forgive him someday and left my house. My fiancé came out and said we should just forget this entire night. She didn't remember what happened, so how could I hold it against her? That was her logic, but I disagreed. We drank and partied together so much in the past, so I knew the only reason she did this tonight was that she thought she could get away with it. It was the only time I wasn't around while she drank, and she took advantage of it. I told her how I was seeing things and asked her to leave. She couldn't believe it. She really didn't think that one night of drinking and sleeping with my best friend would be the end of our 5-year relationship. I told her I couldn't trust her anymore, and even if she never cheated on me again, the fact that she did would chip away at my self-esteem and sanity. She begged and cried for 3 hours while she slowly packed. At some points, she was just laying on the floor dry heaving and crying. I couldn't stand to see her like that for too long, so I went downstairs a few times to clean up the party mess. When she stopped packing for too long, I told her I was going to call her dad to come help. She was mortified. She begged me not to and started packing faster, but I asked her who she wanted me to call to arrange a place for her to stay. She just started sobbing and inaudibly told me she didn't have anywhere else to go, so I called her dad. She was even more upset when he got there and started to blame me for the breakup. She couldn't admit fault to her dad because she didn't want him to be disappointed in her. He sort of got the idea of what happened from me, but I didn't tell him anything, just that we couldn't be together anymore. She was extremely embarrassed and depressed that her father was helping her pack up her stuff from her house. With the party mess still all over the house, the reality of what she did the night before was stuck in her head, tormenting her. I could see it on her face. She knew I went to support my friend in the hospital, and she slept with my best friend during that time. You can't really recover from that. She wanted so badly to leave a lot of her stuff there, but I insisted they take it all, and even started loading her dad's truck with them. He got the idea that I didn't want her to ever have a reason to come back here. The three of us got all of her stuff in the truck. Her phone was laying on the kitchen counter, and I saw a text from my best friend. It said he enjoyed what they did, but couldn't forgive himself for it and thought it would be easier if they didn't see each other again. That must have been pretty devastating for her to hear, on top of what was happening, but I was secretly glad she didn't have an AP to run to for comfort during the consequences of her actions. I didn't have anyone either, so it was only fair. I went to visit my friend in the hospital, and he was much better. I took him home and stayed with him for a while because I didn't want to go back to my place. That's when I met his sister for the first time. She was visiting family, but usually lived in her own place and worked a respectable job. I fell for her instantly, even though it was the same day as my breakup. I developed a friendship with her for a while until I couldn't stand it anymore and asked her out. She said yes, and I'd already forgotten about the betrayal my ex dealt me. Speaking of my ex, she had to start a really crappy part-time job while living at her father's because he wouldn't let her mope around the house all day. She had no idea what she was doing with her life and started to question who she even was. I'm pretty sure she needed to go through this harsh reality check in order to grow and learn from her mistake. I didn't do anything wrong in this situation, but I learned how to cope with heartbreak properly. I think I lucked out by finding another dating prospect so soon, but I'm using self-control and independence in this process. Just because I was used to living with my partner does not mean I'm going to move in too quickly with my new girlfriend. Wow, Opie, you've been through a terrible experience. There you were being a caring and considerate friend in the midst of what was supposed to be a fun night, and you chose to get him help and go with him to the hospital. That is so respectable and kind, exactly what you should have done. In this situation, you depended on your fiancé to be reasonable and considerate just like you were, but instead she chose to get drunk and sleep with your best friend. I'm disappointed in him as well, but the responsibility falls on her shoulders. In order for a relationship to blossom, there has to be open communication and neither person should get a big head. Always look out for each other more than yourself, because if you have a genuine partner, you'll never go without. I'm glad you found a responsible and promising woman to date. You've got a good head on your shoulders, Opie, and you know that letting a new relationship become serious too fast isn't the way to go. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you all the best. Now, let's get into today's second story. My wife, 26, and I, 30, were together for 6 years before she decided to start taking a pottery class. She'd always been really artistic, but due to life's harsh circumstances, she never got the chance to pursue or develop this side of her. We were finally at a place financially where she could do it. I was so happy for her. My hobby consisted of playing my keyboard and writing almost songs. She started bringing home little pottery objects she made, and at first it was great for our relationship. Then she started behaving differently. She started quickly closing browsers whenever I came close to the computer screen. She was also really protective of her flip phone and occasionally took longer to get home from her pottery class. I waited until she was asleep one night before I searched her computer history. There was nothing odd except for an email she kept logging into that I didn't recognize. I installed a keylogger onto the computer and found out the password to the email account along with all the emails she kept in the drafts folder. They were actually back and forth conversations with someone else that was logging into the account. She probably thought she was being clever by never pressing send. All the emails were signed, Professor P, and they mentioned the pottery class a few times. I printed out all the emails between them and found the really intimate ones. According to their conversation, they actually had sex on the professor's desk in the classroom. Whether it was just a fantasy or it really happened, I knew for sure my wife was, at the very least, having an emotional affair, possibly with the professor of her pottery class. I was furious. I couldn't even make myself a microwavable meal without shaking and talking out loud to myself. After I ate it angrily, I printed out all their emails. I had the dates and times each draft was saved. Some of the messages even mentioned times they spent together behind my back and plans to call each other. I was appalled. I encouraged my wife to take this class because I loved her and wanted her to be happy. Because of my caring nature, she found another man to sleep with. It hurt so bad and felt completely unfair. As soon as she got home, I couldn't control myself. I blew up on her. I asked her about emails in a draft folder on her computer, and she went pale. She tried to say those were old messages from when she was in college, but I told her I had proof they weren't old. She didn't move a muscle until I came back with the printed pages. I slapped them down on the table and asked her what the hell was wrong with her. She didn't say anything. I asked her who Professor P was, and she remained silent. She looked extremely guilty, so her silence was not reassuring. I told her it was over. She was caught, so she might as well tell me all about it. She started crying and pleading with me to have mercy on her and our relationship if she came clean about it. I said I would, because I would have said anything at this point to hear the truth come out of her. She said it was her professor from the pottery class. I asked how old he was, and she said 42, so that meant he was 18 years older than her. I freaked out. I asked her if they had sex like their emails said they did, and she said no at first, saying it was just something he wanted to happen. But I could tell she wasn't being honest. I'd been with her for more than 6 years, so I knew what her face looked like when she was lying. I asked her again and told her she might as well get it out now so we could move on properly. She admitted to it. Apparently, they had sex lots of times before and after class. He was married and hated his wife at this point, but couldn't leave her because she ruined his career and life with a child support order. She said she felt bad for him, and no one deserved to be forced to live a life without love. I told her we were done. I said she was not the only fish in the sea for this guy, and if he was going to cheat on his wife, it didn't have to be with her. I thought we were happily married, with a wonderful future ahead of us. She proved me wrong. She was sobbing with a super red face and tears streaming down her face as she told me she was happily married. She said she made the biggest mistake of her life and wouldn't be able to live with herself if I didn't stay with her. I told her that was her problem now. I had been a good husband to her, looking out for her and making sure she was happy, and it wasn't my fault she committed adultery. I said I wouldn't be made into a fool's puppet. I had to remain in control of my life, and if I stayed with her for this, I wouldn't be able to stand on my own 2 feet. Whether she admitted it or not, she wouldn't look at me the same. I wouldn't be as much of a man to her because I let her sleep with another man. She texted her sister to come over and try to talk to me, but once I told her everything that happened and showed her the printed evidence, she couldn't defend herself. She told her she needed to start packing and come stay with her for a while. My wife let out a wail of defeat like this was the end of her life. I asked her sister to tell her that this wasn't the end, just a new beginning. She had to learn from this mistake, not bury it deep or try to cover it up with a new relationship. She had to look herself in the mirror and ask her heart why she did it. Her sister did pass along these messages, and as far as I know, she's still single and working on herself. She calls me all the time, but I don't answer. I'm glad she's working on herself, but it isn't for me. I've started dedicating more time to myself and hobbies I never took the time to develop before. I have full songs written now, so I'll be able to woo my next girlfriend without a problem. Opie, you caught your sneaky wife as soon as her behavior started changing. There are lots of ways to catch a cheating spouse, but I love the keylogging method. You only confronted her after you had evidence, so it was much harder for her to deny it. Don't blame yourself for her infidelity, Opie. Her mistake had nothing to do with you, and she's paying the price for her actions. Guilt and consequences are bitter pills for a cheater to swallow. Now she knows that having sympathy for a struggling man isn't enough of a reason to break her own promises to her spouse. I have faith that you'll be able to find and woo a good quality woman who has had the opportunity to become independent and provide for herself. A woman who knows what she wants and won't subject herself to anything stupid that would destroy a good relationship. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I wish you the best of luck in the future. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. My girlfriend was a very superficial girl. She was going to a beauty school to become a hair and makeup artist. I was going to school to become an engineer. I didn't think any less of her for what her career choice was. She was lovely and charming, like Snow White, and cared about the people she encountered. At least, that was what she let me see of her. I took her to a family reunion after we dated for a year, and my mom got some one-on-one time with her in the kitchen. She reported back to me, telling me to dump this girl as fast as possible. I was shocked by the impression she got, and thought my mom was crazy when she told me my girlfriend was extremely rude, selfish, and inconsiderate. I just didn't see what she saw, so I couldn't bring myself to break up with her. She kept surprising me at my dorm with food, movie rentals, or games to play. She also looked forward to any chance I got to take her out clubbing. Usually, I was busy dedicating myself to my studies. I knew my college education would require sheer determination, strength, and focus. Graduation means I wasn't distracted by a woman, or God forbid, getting one pregnant. I knew my girlfriend didn't want to conceive, but she swore she could time her cycle, so there were a few times she persuaded me not to wear protection. One night, my girlfriend tried really hard to convince me to take her out to a venue that had live music and cheap drinks. I told her I couldn't and maintained my resolve. She got pretty upset with me, and I saw her face fade from smiling and adorable to a resentful frown with piercing eye contact. She left without another word, but it made me mad because she strutted out with her angry supermodel walk. It seemed obvious she planned to go without me, which made it impossible for me to focus on studying. I drove to the venue 30 minutes later and spotted her on the dance floor with another man, surrounded by sweaty people. I watched her and kept my distance while I had a drink. I was curious to see the side of her that my mom warned me about. I didn't believe she'd be so low to cheat on me. She valued me as her man and admired my mind. I thought she wanted a secure and happy future with me. What I saw proved the opposite. She was acting like the most gorgeous and newly single woman in the place. It was only a short time before she let the man she was dancing with lead her back to the bar, where they did one more shot before leaving together. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I followed his car while he drove poorly and failed to notice my tailing him. I parked just about 200 feet behind them, so I saw them go into his apartment. I knocked on the door 20 minutes later after deciding it was what I wanted to do. No one answered, even though I know they heard me. Eventually, he answered the door, and when my girlfriend saw me, she tried to look happy and calm. She said this wasn't what I thought it was, that he was actually her gay stepbrother, and they hung out sometimes. He looked at her like she was crazy. She shoved past him to leave with me and closed the door in his face. We started walking away, but AP didn't want to play along. He felt used and embarrassed. He opened the door again to shout that he was sorry for sleeping with my girlfriend, and she told him she was single. I pulled away from her, and she just kept saying that it wasn't true. I told her that even if she didn't sleep with him, I knew he wasn't her gay stepbrother, and I saw the way she danced with him at the club. That was enough for me to believe what my mom said about her. She said I was being unfair because she claimed to be innocent, but I refused to be made a fool for trusting her after this weird night and my mom's warning. I left her there, right by AP's house. She posted dramatic things about me on Facebook, that I left her in the nowhere in the middle of the night, and that I accused her of cheating when she wasn't that kind of person. I felt a little helpless about all the bashing, but I ultimately didn't care because I knew who I was and what I wanted to become. I went back to my studies and forgot all about my ex-girlfriend. To my surprise, just 4 months later, she posted on Facebook with the happy news that she was expecting. 1 hour later, she was publicly freaking out because AP dumped her and accused her of cheating. Apparently, AP couldn't have children, so he knew he was not the father, even though my ex tried to claim he was. It was a huge mess, and I'm glad I got out of the whole situation when I did. My mom was relieved too. Years later, I'm working as an engineer, and my ex is a single mother of two that never obtained her cosmetology degree. Opie, I am sorry your girlfriend proved herself to be a selfish and manipulative woman. You dodged a bullet, thanks to your mother's warning and girlfriend's telling behavior. It worked out really well to follow her that night, and it was the only time you had to, because you were too smart to be playing these games. She was extremely immature, and it worries me to think about all the men she'll probably trick into loving her. Unless, through some miracle, she learns her lesson and becomes a trustworthy woman. Now she has her kids to consider and put above her own desires. Sometimes it takes a shocking life mistake like this to realize the world doesn't bend to your wishes, and you'll get yourself into a bad place if you think selfishly or take advantage of others. Thank you for sharing your story. Now, let's get into our second story for today. I, 41, didn't realize that my wife, 35, was talking to several other men behind my back. The man she talked to the longest paid her for pictures and videos when we were struggling financially. We had 3 kids, one of them nearly an adult, and we were married for 10 years. After she felt like she could get away with talking to AP behind my back, she started making up stories for places she had to go to. One night she told me she was going to get her hair done, and she did, but it took a long time. Another time, this could have happened many times. While I was at work and the kids were at school, she spent the day with him. He was like her sugar daddy. I didn't know she was sneaking out or doing anything behind my back until I got a call from a married woman we were both friends with for about 7 years. She was crying and said she just found out her husband was cheating on her. I was shocked to hear this and told her I was so sorry. I was shocked because when I spent time with her husband, he told me how much he loved his wife. I recalled one time we were alone together and he spoke highly of his wife and then asked me how my wife felt, but then he corrected himself to how I felt about my wife. Right after this memory, she told me my wife was the one sleeping with him. I instantly understood why she was calling me. I had a vision of my heart plopping onto a platter and a fork stabbing it, then a knife cutting into it. I asked her how she knew, and she said she was holding her husband's phone at that very moment. He forgot it when he said he was going to meet some friends. She tells me she was looking at their messages right now, and he lied. He was going to meet my wife at a book club. Hearing her mention the book club made it all too real. That was definitely my wife's thing. She would go every week, but she never invited me to go. I wasn't much of a reader. AP's wife sent me pictures of what was going on while I drove to the book club. These messages mentioned times they had sex, things they wanted to do, and risk pictures. They were all about to get a rude awakening. I busted down the door and found 8 women, all intently and dreamily listening to AP, the only man in the room, reading a romance novel out loud. My wife was wrapped around his arm with her head on his shoulder. The room gasped and looked at me when I walked in. My wife jumped straight to standing, and AP looked like his worst fears were realized. I looked him dead in the eye and said his wife knew what he was doing. He could only say no, but I said yes and added that she sent me the messages between him and you. I pointed to my wife, then AP ran out the door. My wife covered her mouth, and all the other women stared with gaping mouths as this unfolded. I told her she made a vow to me 10 years ago and gave birth to my children only for our marriage to end like this. My voice cracked and tears started flowing. I told her she ruined 2 marriages and I never wanted her to come back into my home again. She very quietly said that this didn't have to happen because she was sorry and learned her lesson. I told her I didn't give a crap if she learned her lesson. That would only benefit her future, but now I had to pick up the pieces of my own life, the life that she gave up for another man. Then I left. One of the women chased me down and handed me a little piece of paper with her phone number on it. All the other women started whispering and awkwardly leaving, itching to spread the word around town about the book club breakup. As soon as I got home, I realized this building didn't feel like home anymore, just a grave of the life I was living. So I packed up the kids and everything I could over the next few days and with my brother's help, moved into my parents' house 3 hours away. This was what I needed to do while I divorced my wife and got financially situated to the point where I could buy a new home. Meanwhile, AP was divorced and moved in with my ex. They probably thought everything was going to be okay for them until they were both ordered to pay child support. But that's not all. AP found out just a few weeks later that he wasn't my wife's only lover, and after some thought, she decided she could do better than him. She moved out, leaving him broke and the sole person living in our old marital home. She moved in with some dangerously rich man. She was treated pretty well there at first, and they actually decided to have a baby together. However, while the paint was drying in the nursery, my wife's new husband cheated on her. Then he wanted the new woman to be his wife and have his babies. So he kicked out my ex, providing her the money for an abortion. I don't know if any of you guys believe in karma, but I am certain that's what happened here. My wife wanted the money and didn't give a crap about anyone else. So that's literally what she got. Temporary riches from someone that didn't give a crap about her. I've since bought a new place and remarried. I thought I should share this story to inspire people, particularly men, who were betrayed by a woman that they trusted. As much as it hurts, we are strong enough to get through it. Men are meant to take the hardest crap dealt in the world. We don't even need much to keep on going. But if a woman fails you, just get another one. I know that sounds heartless, but I was able to do just that very thing. No matter what you're faced with, always be communicative and caring while knowing your own boundaries and what you deserve. That's how you just keep surviving and functioning. Opie, I am glad to hear that justice was served to your cheating wife. There may not be such a thing as two souls destined for each other, but as mature adults, we each have the chance and responsibility to wisely choose the partner we want to commit to and love, no matter what. The person that matches us as closely as possible, among other factors. And when it seems to be getting boring or difficult, you fight to rekindle the love and commitment that you found in each other. If there are things to talk about them. That's how you solve things that are causing problems, no matter how painful, humiliating, or uncertain it is. And if there aren't any jaw-breaking problems, and there's still love in the relationship, then there's no reason to betray. Them being bored, under stress, or tempted by another person certainly is not enough to put your loved one through a tragic life event they must overcome. I'm glad to hear you've overcome this extremely difficult time in your life. Remember, you are worthy of all the love and happiness you find. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Sometimes you will find out that your partner cheated on you from an unlikely source. Most of the time, women stick together and they don't snitch, but that didn't happen in this case. For non-glorious years, my wife Samantha and I were a loving couple. I thought anyway. We lived in the sunny landscapes of California, renting houses in various spots along the coast to satisfy our adventurous spirits. Life was good. We surfed in the mornings, hiked in the afternoons, and spent our evenings cooking elaborate meals together. Our social circle consisted of fellow thrill seekers, many of whom were couples that Samantha had known since high school. Her best friend, Mandy, and Mandy's husband, Ryan, were fixtures in our lives. The four of us were inseparable, taking weekend trips to Napa Valley, road trips up the Pacific Coast Highway, and camping excursions in Joshua Tree. I considered Ryan like a brother. We watched football together, talked business ideas, and confided in each other about our relationships. My whole world came crashing down when an anonymous letter arrived in the mail addressed to me. The letter was from Mandy. The content was concise, but soul-shattering. Samantha has cheated on you 4 times. Each incident happened during her so-called girls' nights out. My hands shook as the room started spinning. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself, the letter falling to the floor. Samantha had always been adamant that our girls' nights were innocent fun, Monty Python, gossiping and dancing. No men allowed. I searched my memory for any red flags, any signs that something more may have happened. Coming up empty, my mind raced with questions. When did this happen? Where did they go? Who told Mandy? And why did she wait until now to tell me? I knew confronting Samantha would be useless. She would adamantly deny everything. I needed more information. I picked up my phone and texted Mandy, "We need to talk ASAP." Within a minute, she responded, "Ryan's out of town until Friday. Come by the house tonight at 7. Mandy had also informed Ryan that I was coming over. This was really happening. Looking at the clock, I had a few hours until I needed to meet Mandy. I decided to go see my colleague, Steve, and get his advice on the situation. Steve and I worked together a few years back, and he was one of the most level-headed people I knew. I met Steve at a coffee shop down the street from his house. As I relayed the bombshell news, Steve listened intently. You need to talk to Mandy and get the full story before you do anything else. But ultimately, you have got to look out for yourself. Your next steps depend on what Samantha did." Steve's advice echoed in my mind. I left the coffee shop and went for a long drive to clear my head before meeting Mandy. At 7 p.m. sharp, I knocked on Mandy's front door. As she let me in, her eyes were brimming with tears. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table as she detailed the painful revelations 4 times over the past 18 months. Samantha had lied about going out with the girls. She actually went to meet other couples at house parties where many were openly cheating on their partners. Mandy found out when she overheard Samantha on the phone with someone organizing another hookup. Demanding answers, Samantha broke down and admitted everything to Mandy. She swore she didn't have actual sex with anyone, but the deception and betrayal stung sharply. Samantha begged Mandy to keep it a secret, insisting it would never happen again. For months, Mandy reluctantly stayed silent, but the guilt ate away at her, and she knew if the roles were reversed, she'd want the truth, so she sent a letter. "I'm so sorry," Mandy said, tears streaming down her face. I never thought Samantha was capable of this. I sat in stunned silence, grasping the edges of my now broken reality. Samantha had meticulously lied to me over and over. Entire nights of my life were a fabrication. I felt sick to my stomach as I imagined her flirting at house parties, enjoying the ego boost of other men desiring her. Mandy reached out and squeezed my hand. "Whatever you need, I'm here for you." I thanked her for having the courage to tell me the truth, even when it hurt. Driving home, I processed the ramifications, of what Samantha did. According to California law, infidelity cannot be used as leverage in divorce proceedings. So, even if Mandy was to testify in court on my behalf, it would be useless. Did I want to salvage this marriage? Could I ever trust Samantha again? I decided I needed legal counsel to understand all my options. The next morning, I scheduled a consultation with Allison, a seasoned divorce attorney recommended by Steve. You have two options, Allison explained. You can either confront your wife when she returns, or see if there's any hope left for the marriage. Many couples do manage to heal after an affair with counseling, but it takes tremendous work and commitment on both sides, or you can discreetly initiate separation. Start untangling your finances. Find a new place to live and have her served with divorce papers. That route obviously provides a clean break. I wasn't ready to make any definite moves yet. So Allison summarized the key logistical steps if I decided on divorce. Over the next few days, my thoughts hovered between utter heartbreak and boiling anger. One minute, I collapsed on the couch in tears. The next, I was throwing tennis balls angrily against the garage door. By Friday, my dominant sentiment was indignation at Samantha for betraying me, and at myself for being so oblivious. I decided right then that I was leaving her. Steve's wise words echoed in my mind. You got to look out for yourself for once. I needed to put my own well-being first. I texted Steve explaining my decision. Always pragmatic. He said, let me know how I can help. I asked if I could rent his vacant apartment for a few months while I figured out the next steps. Of course, it's all yours. Steve immediately responded. When Samantha's car pulled into the driveway Friday night, I was sitting on the front porch steps waiting for her. I watched her face transform from cheerful to crestfallen as she registered the suitcase at my feet. We need to talk. I have something to show you first. Before she could conjure any excuses, I withdrew Mandy's letter from my pocket and held it up. Samantha's face contorted in shock. How could Mandy do this to me? She shrieked. You're going to believe something from Mandy over your own wife. She's a miserable, bored housewife who lives through my drama. I shook my head in disbelief at her audacity to make Mandy the villain. Save it, Samantha. The jig is up. I know about the house parties. I know about you meeting with other couples and other men. I know about everything. Samantha's eyes darted around frantically as she grabs for plausible denials. Of course there was no sly way out. Mandy had already come clean with the whole dirty truth. I'm so sorry, she choked out. You have to believe me. Nothing physical ever happened. It was just stupid thrill-seeking. It was an invitation-only scene, had house parties with hot singles and open-minded couples. It was a total farce. I listened, stone-faced, unable to muster any sympathy. The lying is just as bad as the cheating, Samantha. For over a year, you've been living a double life behind my back. We're done. Samantha pleaded tearfully for a second chance, but my mind was made up. I carried my suitcase to the car, ignoring her frantic questions about where I was going. As I backed out of the driveway, she ran alongside my car, sobbing and begging me not to leave. My heart ached, seeing her so distraught, but I maintained my composure and drove off. She brought this on herself. For me, the only way forward was out. I moved into Steve's fully furnished apartment that night. He came over and helped me bring my things up from the car. Settling onto the couch with a beer, I finally let the emotions of the day spill out. Steve listened quietly. I was beyond grateful to have such a true friend. By morning, the events of the last week felt like a bad dream. In some ways, it was a relief to have the truth exposed, instead of lurking silently. But my sense of betrayal still stung sharply. Samantha had been my whole world for nearly a decade. Blowing up that world left me feeling rudderless. I distracted myself with the logistics of getting settled in the apartment. I contacted the bank to remove Samantha from my accounts and revoked her authorized user status on my credit cards. Next, I emailed my boss, explaining I was dealing with an unexpected life change and needed to work remotely for a bit. Luckily, my job in tech allowed that flexibility. I spent the next few days working from my couch, grateful for the productive distraction. By Wednesday, word had spread among our wider social circle about the implosion of my marriage. My mom and sister called to check on me, both offering their unconditional support. They were as shocked and disappointed as I was about Samantha's duplicity. Later that day, I met my dad for lunch at a quiet bistro. I braced myself for the "I told you" speech, since my dad never quite trusted Samantha's adventurous, free-spirited nature, but he was sensitive and sympathetic as I confided the painful details. He agreed to keep it quiet from my mom for now. She had always adored Samantha, and the revelation would devastate her. I decided to take control of the narrative before Samantha could twist the story against me. That night, I posted a video on Facebook Live, knowing many of our friends would be watching. I'm here to set the record straight. Many of you are probably wondering why Samantha and I have gone our separate ways. Well, the truth is she was living a double life, attending house parties with married couples. All the while, she was claiming she was just doing girls' night out. I went on to explain Samantha's web of lies and betrayal over the past 18 months. Even a few of Samantha's childhood friends messaged me privately to apologize for her behavior. They were shocked and angry on my behalf. The emotional relief I felt at blowing Samantha's secret wide open was comforting. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts. Childhood buddies, former colleagues, cousins I hadn't talked to in years, all reaching out to check in. I awoke the next morning to an avalanche of missed calls and voicemails from Samantha. Her tone cycled through rage, disbelief, and pleading. I silenced my phone and focused on returning messages from people I actually wanted to talk to. My inbox was also flooded with emails containing links and screenshots. Facebook Live had gone viral within the California surf community. People were reposting it everywhere in solidarity with me. Samantha was being painted as the villain, which felt justified after her years of lies. 2 months after I left Samantha, an official-looking envelope arrived at Steve's apartment. I ripped it open to find divorce papers from Samantha's attorney. Even though I was expecting it, the finality of seeing it in writing hit me hard. Samantha was petitioning for an even split of assets and debts accrued during our marriage. She also wanted me to assume the lease on the BMW she drove. Since it wasn't my name, fair enough. I just wanted closure. The next few weeks were consumed with legal proceedings, document sightings, affidavits, negotiations between attorneys. In the end, the process went as amicable as possible, given the circumstances. I kept the house we owned in Big Sur. Samantha kept the BMW. I told her and the attorney I would give her a year to refinance the BMW in her name. They both agreed. Our savings were divided down the middle. On paper, it was a clean split. Emotionally, though, I was still splitting apart inside. My new normal of solitary evenings felt jarringly foreign. I missed Samantha's laughter ringing through the house while we cooked dinner, missed her playful smile first thing in the morning, missed the partnership and camaraderie that held our relationship together for nearly a decade. But trust, once it's broken, it's impossible to repair it. Samantha fractured the very foundation of our marriage. Every time I looked at her now, all I saw was a brokenness. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I was craving a clean slate. Life in California was too entwined with memories of Samantha. I decided to relocate to Seattle, partly for a fresh start, but also for an exciting new job opportunity. Steve helped me load up a U-Haul with the belongings I wanted to keep. I took one last look at the place we once called home, said a bittersweet goodbye to the Pacific Ocean, and embarked on my next adventure. Settling into Seattle felt cathartic. I reveled in exploring a new city, finding favorite cafes and libraries to work from. Through a neighborhood listserv, I was introduced to a group of guys around my age who also worked in tech. We started getting together regularly for happy hours and camping trips. In this new chapter, I felt in control of my narrative. I was building a life centered around things I valued: career, community, and truth. My trust in others had been shattered, but I was slowly piecing it back together by being more selective about who I let in. A year and a half after leaving Samantha, my heart was starting to open itself to possibilities again. I met an intelligent, grounded woman at a friend's rooftop party. Over the next few months, we fell into an easy rhythm, taking weekend bike rides and cooking meals together. It was a stirring reminder that light can still emerge from darkness. Healing takes time, but the right people can illuminate your path back to hope. My wounds from Samantha's betrayal will always leave scars, but scars are nothing to be ashamed of. They are silent evidence that I survived. I made it through the fire and emerged on the other side, older and wiser. What Samantha did was an egregious violation of trust, but the blame rests squarely on her. I don't regret leaving everything behind for a shot at something better. Don't we all deserve to feel truly seen, known, and loved? I'm grateful that a friend cared enough to tell me the truth, even when it hurt. Her courage enabled me to take back control of my life. Now I can devote my energy to more meaningful pursuits and people. So here I am, embracing this new adventure in an unfamiliar place. I'm crafting a life centered around authenticity, second chances, and a world of possibilities. My past will always be a part of me, but it's time to start writing a new future. Well, in my opinion, I think Mandy opened the door to Samantha cheating, but her guilty conscience got the better of her, which I think was the right thing to do. Now, what I gather was Mandy and her husband seemed to be swingers. I might be wrong, but Samantha took the opportunity to label those outings with Mandy and her husband as girls' night, but I don't think he knew Randy was also attending these parties. A crazy story indeed.